Welcome to Charting Change in Legal, our post Legal Week recap edition. I'm Ari Kaplan, an analyst that covers the legal industry, and I'm here with my co-host.
Caroline Hill. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Hi, Ari. I'm the
Hi,
editor.
Carolyn.
Oh, I should say I'm the editor of Legal IT Insider. Yeah, that bit would be relevant, right?
And off the rails in 14 seconds. Well done. Well done for both of us. Yes, Caroline, so nice to see you. It was fantastic to see you in New York, notwithstanding what a whirlwind and good weather, just great legal week. And also, there was some nostalgia among a lot of the attendees because it's the last one that will be at that location, and that's become iconic in the legal tech world. So I look forward to what comes, but I'm grateful for what we had for so many years.
It's so long. And actually, I think we should maybe try and reach out and get people to share some memories of those early years. It's been going such a long time. So much has changed. And the conference has really outgrown the Hilton. I think that's fair to say. And I think people have had enough of that venue. I don't think that there's any sadness that it's moving from there. But at the same time, when you think about the changes that the industry is currently going through and how much has changed in the years since it's been at the Hilton, it's quite astonishing.
Although I feel like I've just figured out all the hacks. I use the executive lounge in the lobby. I stay there. I know where the run that goes through Central Park is. I know where people can walk. I have some favorite coffee places. It just when you figure it out. I'm sure I've told you this, but I read a book. I listened to an audiobook years ago by a gentleman named Jerry Weintraub, who was a famous Hollywood producer. He did Ocean's 11, all those movies, did the Karate Kid movies. He was the producer for Frank Sinatra. And he has this great audiobook. It's called When I Stop Talking, You'll Know I'm Dead. And and it's really great. And he talks about all of his life experiences and just guys had an extraordinary he has since passed away, but he had an extraordinary life. And he talked about this concept of, every 5 years or so, a giant hand comes across and sweeps all the dishes off the table, and you just start again. And it was powerful. The image is very powerful, especially in an audiobook. And I get the sense we're gonna do that. And I think there's a sort of refreshing characteristic to it. And it'll add parity. There won't be any advantages in some ways because everybody is going to start afresh and new next year. But I look forward to it. I wish the best of luck to my peers at ALM and their newly merged company to produce the event. So we'll see what
Oh
happens. But it was great.
yeah, that
Yeah.
merger came out. This merger came out
Monday
with
it came out like the day right before, and we'll see.
yeah.
I haven't heard news since, but I have, many colleagues there and have been lucky to work with them over the years. In fact, I think that was one of the first places I'd ever gotten anything published in the late 90s. So,
Law business research. Yeah.
yeah, no, well, just the New York Law Journal or the National Law Journal, any of those at ALM. So well,
Yeah.
tell me, so what did you think of the event substantively?
So it was great. So we did a lot of recording. Well, I did some Vox Pop videos, which were quite fun. So it's always a good way to capture the moment and talk to people about what they've released. There were obviously some new Gen AI products. It's quite an e-discovery heavy conference, as you know. And so a lot of the news came from e-discovery vendors. And so I spoke to the likes of Everlaw and Epic and some of the content I still haven't produced. And what's great about doing those little Vox Pop videos is that they're instant. I'm lucky enough to now have help with production. So it was great to send it over the pond and then get people to produce it and share it during the conference, which I think added a bit of fun as well. People like to sort of see themselves on camera. So that was new and that was pretty fun. How about you? And then I did my own event, which we'll come on to, which was super cool. But what about you with the conference?
I think people were generally excited. And of course, there are sort of moments that are occurring now where the excitement, enthusiasm, concern, uncertainty is sort of ebbing and flowing almost day to day. And so I think at that moment when we were at Legal Week, people were excited. It seemed they felt grateful for being able to get together there. And you know, I was happy to have a lot of those conversations. It was great to see people I had not seen and also to just reconnect. I posted a video. There's a great Yankees video produced, I think, by Nike when Derek Jeter, who you may recall is a famous all-star from the New York Yankees, just a Hall of Famer, I should say, who was actually the keynote speaker at my son's graduation. So I'm very excited about that. In addition to seeing my son graduate, but there's a video, and they gave this tribute video, and the video is merely this man, and he always sort of like tipped his cap and moved his cap, and so you have all these famous people tipping their cap to this all-star famous baseball player as a nod to his retirement. And I felt like whenever I'd see people, I was always sort of giving them the hat tip of like, great to see you, even though we'll not have a conversation because we're racing past each other. And I think that there's that feeling there, like, and everyone seems to be focused in the same direction. There's a lot of excitement, a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of investment of time and money in moving the profession forward. And every once in a while, you just step back and think, oh, right, we're all kind of rowing in that same direction, and I think we're moving something. So I'm optimistic.
We are. I think I heard mixed voices in terms of, so there was a little more focus, or there's a more attempt at showing use cases. So
Hmm.
on the very first day, there was a session where the likes of Hogan Lovells and others, Cleary, I think was on a couple of sessions. They were talking about specific Gen AI use cases. I think those sort of sessions are really key. I saw Rob Kerr from Winston on another panel talking about observations and use cases. I think that's really important. I think there was a perception amongst some people I spoke to that there's still too, some of this stuff is still too high level. I think that's always going to be the case with this sort of conference. But in the session that I ran, which actually was at Winston with Rob, we it was behind closed doors. I did share some, agreed findings from the session, but a lot of it was just Chatham House. We wasn't Chatham House, but you know what I mean. We agreed that we would sort of agree what was shared to enable open conversation, and I think that was felt to be super valuable. Just being able to, albeit I'm a journalist, but we have that trust, right? Like, so they know that things that we discuss are going to just help my knowledge and learning, and won't be shared beyond what we agree in terms of specifics. But I think that's kind of that was really helpful for me to gauge where people are at in terms of the types of things that they're doing, and the kind of conversations that they're having. And a lot of the main thing that we focused on was adoption. And also a lot of so a lot of it was tech, but a lot of it was culture, and some of the challenges that are still coming up for them in terms of things like is the tech up to scratch? And that was something that was raised. And Rob Kerr said he thinks actually it is up to scratch. Perhaps we're just it's interesting that he's creating what you might think of as a playground, for people to use agreed Gen AI tools and find different use cases. And that's something else that the Conan Hines from Fried Frank picked up on. He liked this sort of concept of this sort of playground type theme coming up, where the use cases that people are coming up with are sometimes the most unexpected. So I think that was kind of fascinating. But then you've got the perennial challenges around billable hour, which no doubt you've spent a lot of time talking about, and whether that's going to change. I had Mike Haven from Meta, who was, if you read, wrote a piece about this, and he says that he was really, happy to see the level of enthusiasm and engagement across the firms that are clearly sort of really trying to build this into their practices. And it's interesting. It'll be interesting from a client perspective as to, what this will mean in terms of AFAs, etc. But yeah, it was fascinating for me. I would say this because it's my thing, but that was one of my favorite parts of the conference, and I know you did a ton as well.
Well, somebody approached me. I had wonderfully, I thought, insightful conversations, and a group of lawyers approached me, and we're struggling with some of the challenges associated with the array of tools that are now available to them. And they said, couldn't you just tell us what tool to buy? And I said, you've completely missed the question. And what is the problem you're trying to solve? And one of the emerging trends has been, interestingly, that as people ask that question, they realize it's something else, some other piece of technology, automation, for example, as opposed to generative AI. And there were conversations about that, or to harness your knowledge in some more effective, unique, holistic way. I was very lucky to collaborate on a dinner with the team at Clear People, and we hosted a really a who's who of knowledge management and innovation leaders in the room. And they were very generous in sort of sharing their perspectives on what this landscape looks like. And you always see them. They're the celebrities now of legal because they've been doing this for so long that they know all the nuances, all the foundational activities that need to happen before anything of even remotely resembling success is going to take place. And you want to listen to those people. And if I can get in a room like as you were and have a conversation, I feel very lucky. And I even was of the co-facilitator of a discussion at the invitation only skills event. I was a co-facilitator with Oz Ben Amram on the What's Hot. And they've done some interesting research that I'll be publishing about on where people are using tools, what their use cases are, how they feel about it. So, directly from the people who are buying, deploying, and trying to implement some of these activities. So you couldn't have had a more substantive, practical set of discussions than at Legal Week this year. That was my sense.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, the O's session is always great. I actually went to the afternoon session um, with Christian Lang because so it's slightly different. So O's Banana will obviously host skills and directed at the KM communities, and then in the afternoon, Christian Lang hosted with O's in the same venue, I think, CreatorCon, which is based on his platform Lega AI, which is a Gen AI platform where you can start to experiment with all different models. I stayed a couple of hours and then I had to go to the airport. But so it was enough time to sort of be part of the whole the pink t-shirt brigade for a start. He had everyone wearing color coordinated t-shirts. But like teaching people how to create prompts and then giving them specific tasks. Like so you had like different tasks, different legal tasks that you had to complete, and then you could use different models. And it was very cool. It was very practical, which I think is exactly what people need.
Yeah, I know, there's been this interesting challenge and evolution of the perception because there were several people in my conversations who highlighted that initially the clients might have said, we don't want you using this. We don't want you using our data to train. And they said, well, if you don't want us to use this, when should we use it, and how will you get the benefit of us using it if you're telling us that we can't use it? And then when those conversations were happening, they thought, wait, I wasn't sure we were telling you you couldn't totally use it, just partially use it. So there's this sort of schizophrenic policy making that has taken place, and that's starting to harmonize. The clients and the law firms are starting to come to a place where they can understand how they would want to use it and where it would best benefit them. And the other party could learn, well, okay, this is the kind of stuff we would be okay with you using this. And that will probably accelerate this process. Once people have a better understanding of the security, some of the operational aspects of it, and who's okay with what use case, seems like we will go quickly. We'll sort of have open road in some respect and be able to, press the gas pedal a little bit. That's my sense, so that we'll be able to gauge this. Maybe not as soon as clock, because that's in a month, but probably within a few months at Ilticon, we will probably have a different perspective. I'm actually also lucky to be attending Evolve for a day to moderate the discussion they're having about use cases of generative AI in law firms. So
Awesome.
it'll be a good opportunity to just benchmark a little bit about was there progress, or maybe there'll be some different perspectives that can share the evolution of this very rapidly moving issue.
I think it's still a bit schizophrenic on the client side. It reminds me, I've used this analogy a couple of times. It reminds me of the early to then not so early days of cloud, where clients would be saying, we don't want you to use the cloud. But they'd be using cloud themselves, right? Do you remember those days? And like, but there was like a still even fairly long into the process, there were contradictions, and they're still, from speaking to law firms, contradictions, in terms of what clients are asking and expecting. And there's sometimes the funniest one is, we want you to be using it, but just not with our data, right? We want you to be learning and we want you to be experimenting, but just not anything to do with us, which is really quite funny. And obviously you can find ways to do that, of course, right? Like, just you can create, for the stuff that Christian's doing with Lega is a perfect example of how you can sort of start to experiment and use Gen AI. And I've mentioned Sean Curran at Gilo. He's obviously doing something similar in the UK, but his clients are global. You can start to experiment, but there, for me, it's interesting. There's going to be, for a period of time longer, quite a lot of contradictions, I think, in terms of, and it probably depends on the sophistication or even just the individuality. Each individual client, there'll be something different.
Well, you highlight a very interesting point that when the cloud was emerging, companies were using this long before they were giving permission. And often these tools require tremendous infrastructure investment. Those investments are controlled at the enterprise level by IT or, some other group. And so I think the same was true. Lots of these giant enterprises have been deploying a generative AI application and really investing heavily in it for some time, and sort of trickling it down to the different groups, including legal. And so there's a little bit of a disconnect in terms of the company. In all my GC research, for years I've been asking now general counsel about the investment in generative AI, and it's been an interesting split just because they recognize that their company at a global level has been making investments in this since it made sense to do so, but at legal, not quite yet. I do think that that's shifting quickly, just because
Mm.
the question will be, and you raised the billable hour for a second, but the question will be, what are the benefits, and how do we value the work? And I think that is an open question that will remain challenging because it goes to the fundamental core of the business model in legal, and that itself will take a lot more time, and it won't just be resolved in a few months. But it's
No.
starting to happen, and I feel
It,
optimistic. We'll see how things
well,
move.
it's funny because at my event we had Isidore Okoro from Steptoe Johnson, their CIO, and he said he was interested. There's a difference in the excuse me, in the UK and the US, in terms of me moving away from the billable hour slightly, probably, but he said he was interested in the level already of the conversations around moving away from traditional billing models, like amongst people's, that it's already very much happening. It's in the UK, I'd say there's a big chunk of law firm work for certain firms that is very much not done on the billable hour already, right? Like, there's already been a move away from the billable hour for a lot of. I remember doing a panel years ago with Alex Hamilton from Radiant Law, and I always refer to Radiant Law because they were set up on the basis of value-based billing.
Absolutely.
Um,
Alex is a star
yeah,
in this space for sure.
yeah, so I always refer, and he and I years ago did a panel, and we we were going, billable hour, one day it's going to die, and value-based billing. And then a whole bunch of people in the audience who were from the real estate sector came to us, and they were like, we've not used the billable hour for years. I think they were like, hoping for a little bit more nuanced conversation. To be frank, they didn't say that, but that's kind of I felt that. So I think, it's interesting. It's important not to be sort of accurate, perhaps, in our understanding of how far we've come, and perhaps the geographical differences as well. But yeah, I think that there's that sense very much that that in order to get to treat this as exciting and to get the full potential, that if you're competing against yourself almost by having a billable hour, then that is going to be something that's going to make life a lot more difficult. So wherever possible, maybe there'll be some parts, high value stuff will always be done by the hour, but where there's sort of like tranches or repeat work or whatever, if there's a way of doing a fixed fee, that, and when technology can really start to create and drive efficiencies, I think that's where, firms are going to start going, oh, hey, that's a bit of a no-brainer.
I feel like there are a couple of headwinds here. One of which was highlighted at my dinner, which was that law firm leaders are under pressure from so many different directions that how they invest and focus on innovation initiatives in an environment where so many issues are consuming their time is an open question, and I think is a fair one. I do also get the sense that the oldest millennials are now becoming partner. The some of the even the oldest millennials are emerging toward equity, if that's an option at their organizations. And once this starts to happen, I was at a law school last week speaking, delivering a presentation called the legal profession at the crossroads, like at a crossroads, just trying to give them a sense, both the students and faculty, just a sense of where we've been, where we are, where we're headed as a profession based on lots of research that I've been lucky to do recently. And I asked the audience if anybody had a 2L summer position at a firm. And several people raised their hand. And I just pointed to someone and I said, were you part of the group who was responsible for evaluating the new generative AI thing, whatever that thing is? I didn't mention any brand names or anything. And he's like, "How did you know? That's amazing." Yeah, I was involved in the pilot of it. And I was like, I know. They're giving this responsibility to the newest people because they're being raised with
Yeah,
this technology. So foundationally, that will be just sort of the fabric of their practice experience. And so I feel
yeah,
like there's this convergence happening. So from the beginning, the newest, the summers even, are tasked with telling them, how do you like working with this? They'll need that dough through that year, and then when they come back, they'll be this fully formulated, and then you'll have these other people as a bookend who are still fairly young and still fairly part of this community of people that have grown up technologically centric, but older and having had their foot in both worlds. And so once that happens, I just feel like that convergence will drive a change in the value proposition, but
yeah.
still going to take a little while.
So just really quickly on that. So that's fascinating because again, Rob Kerr at Winston, he did a panel, and he was talking about, and actually he said this in my session as well, that that he so people are bringing in brand new fresh faces because they want creative blue sky thinking. So Rob Winston is hiring adoption specialists that aren't necessarily from the legal sector. And if you look in the press, so DeepSeek have said quite famously now that they are hiring people who are brand new developers because they want that complete blue sky thinking. This is an age where I feel like the rules are changing. We talk about you need to find a problem and then you need to find a solution to it. I feel like obviously that is still the case, but there is an element of this all being put in the washing machine and the people just going, we're just going to have to see what happens and we're going to have to try new things. I feel like that there's a sense of you can do it the old way, but you also have to do some things a brand new way.
Well, as we close,
Mm,
someone mentioned to me during Legal Week that the job of IT has historically been to make sure that the trains keep running, that we never go off track. And the
mm.
job of the innovators at the firm is to build a completely new train. And there was all this discussion. There were several themes there. There were sort of the job of certain leaders at the firm is to make sure nothing breaks, and the
Mm.
job of the innovators is to break them. And so that's sort of where we are, and yet we're all moving in that same direction, but maybe on parallel paths, or maybe there's sort of like a sandbox lane. And, we'll see where it goes. But it was wonderful to see you. It was wonderful to be
Well,
there. I
I
was
see
so grateful to
you.
all the people. I look forward to your videos and my mixtapes. Once I don't have the luxury of as much support, but I will get it done. And I'm looking forward to sharing it. And I'm excited for our next conversation. Caroline Hill, always a privilege.
Ari Kaplan, thank you so much.
thank you all for listening to this week's edition of Charting Change in Legal. Bye, everyone.